Welcome to Stories from the Center of the Universe, the podcast about the human experience.
Chris Gorres, welcome to the Center of the Universe.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Paul. I'm excited. I knew that in 2018 when we moved to Richmond, Virginia, I was moving to Central Virginia, but I didn't realize this was the center of the universe too.
So to be very, very clear, it has two meanings for me. Center of the Universe is actually the slogan for the little town north of Richmond called Ashland.
Mm-hmm.
And then this conversation, we're in the center of the universe having this conversation.
Got it. I like it. Let's roll with it.
Yeah. And by the way, I know you're from Maryland. We'll get into that a little bit. I got a good buddy of mine. He's originally from New Jersey. My wife's from New Jersey, and he was on this podcast, and he said, "Center of the Universe, New Jersey," and I'm like, "No way, this podcast, man, no way."
Yeah, wherever the center of the universe actually is, it's definitely not Jersey. So let's go with that.
We can agree on that.
We'll agree on that. Yeah,
absolutely. All right, so let's start with you and I connected to Chris Gaskell. Can you tell that story? How you and Chris know each other?
Yeah. So Chris was one of the first people that I met down here, and his family was one of the first families that we met. We were originally from Maryland, moved around the DMV area, if you know it well. The last place that we lived at before moving down here was Leesburg, Virginia. I had a couple of jobs up there and worked for the Washington Redskins and had a couple of different gigs up there. So when we moved here, the first thing that we needed to do was find a softball team for my daughter to play on. And Chris was coaching with his daughter. They were 12 at the time. And he really liked the way that she hustled, the way that she played, and her attitude and her effort. So they made a spot for her on the team, and the rest is kind of history.
And you and Chris hit it off, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, look, the one thing that we will always have in common is our love for our daughters, and you know, as a softball dad, there's always going to be something that we share those experiences, and yeah, man, just a couple of former athletes that are pouring into our own families now. So, you know, that was something that we have in common and we will have in common going forward.
All right. So you mentioned being an athlete. Were you just a kid who played sports all the time coming up?
I did. I mean, look, we didn't have what we have now. We don't have what my kids have with, you know, Xbox and PlayStation and Nintendo DS and all that. And if you did want to get onto the internet, you had to use this modem to dial up, and you hear these weird rings, and, you know, it wasn't as fast as it is now. Yeah. So to keep myself entertained, you know, I would go and play sports. And I grew up in a neighborhood that wasn't the worst of neighborhoods, but it certainly wasn't the best of neighborhoods. And for me to be able to cut my teeth playing against kids who were older than me, playing all sports, I played basketball, football, baseball. If the kids wanted to rollerblade, we would just make up all kinds of games, and we were just outside all day. And then, of course, my mom and my dad made sure that the education matched that education was something that was a priority, and it wasn't just sports. So I ended up turning my athletic career after high school. I went to Cornell University, where I played football and studied engineering. So yeah, sports has always been a big part of my life.
Oh, I didn't realize I was talking to a Cornell guy.
Yeah. Go Big Red. Me and Andy Bernard. You know?
That's right. Oh, yeah, so that's spicy. We're going to dive into a lot of stuff from what you just said. All right, so let's just start from the beginning. You grew up in Southern Maryland, and you would say it's DC, not Baltimore.
No, so Southern Maryland would be like Waldorf. If you're from Maryland, that's what you would call Waldorf, and down like past.
Oh, I forget how funny the shape is in Maryland.
Yeah. It's really weird. So like we're just north of Washington, D.C. in a place called Silver Spring. That's where I grew up.
So D.C. Metro, you're a D.C. Metro kid.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I would take the Metro to work. I worked in D.C. and yeah, I'm a D.C. kid.
All right, so you're playing a bunch of sports, and look, I don't know how old you are. I'm 55. I'm positive you're younger than I am, but you're probably older than you look. You look like you're in your 20s. And
I'm going to be 42 in September.
Okay, so you're of an age where did you have many more options than football, basketball, and baseball to play? I mean, I guess there were other sports in school, right? But they weren't as big as those three.
Yeah, I mean, lacrosse was a big thing because lacrosse has always been a big thing in Maryland. That was not something that I had access to. Lacrosse was and still kind of is an access sport where there's a cost of entry into that sport, and that was not something that my parents could afford at the time. So football, basketball, baseball was, like it's funny when my daughter and Marley, Chris's daughter, were playing on they all had their own helmets, they all had their own bats, they all had their own gloves. Like when I played baseball, we had like 3 helmets for the whole team, and hopefully one of them fit. We had like 2 bats, and you pick the one that you like, and we shared equipment, so it was very different for me growing up. But yeah, like there was hockey, there was volleyball, there was all those things, but for me, like football was what I wanted to do. That was my main sport. That was my love.
Well, and to your point around 2 or 3 baseball helmets, 2 or 3 bats, I mean, that's the way I grew up too. Football has a lot of equipment, but it's so popular that there
Right.
are forces that are willing to spend a lot of money so kids can play football.
Right.
Basketball is not super cost intensive other than you got to have a court to play on.
Right.
In baseball, it's America's pastime. All you really need is a ball, a bat, and a couple of helmets, and you two and gloves, and you two can play baseball. And your point about lacrosse, in Virginia, growing up in the 70s and 80s, there were, I think, 9 schools that had lacrosse teams.
Right.
They were all private except for one.
Right.
And so when you talk about access to lacrosse, it was really hard to get into lacrosse. I thought it was the strangest sport in the world when I first discovered it as a 13-year-old.
Yeah. It was one of those sports though that the coaches at the schools, like I went to a school called Good Counsel High School, which is a very good academic school. It's a co-ed Catholic school, and we have a very good football team. But the lacrosse team and the lacrosse coaches would actively recruit the football players. Like, listen, I'll teach you how to hold a stick. In 2 months, you're going to be a great lacrosse player. Just give me your speed and your agility, and we'll figure out how to make that work. So it was always around me, but I never got into it.
Yeah, it seemed really hard to pick up. And look, football players that are big and fast and not afraid of contact make great defenders and even midfielders in lacrosse.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So let's go through each sport.
Yeah.
You played from, I imagine, a young age, like 6, 7, 8 in all 3?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember not playing sports. So ever since I was a kid, whether it was running track or playing football, flag football, basketball, literally everything. I was involved in everything.
All right. What positions did you play in football?
So I started out as a quarterback in football. Probably because I was smart enough to know all the plays and I knew where people were supposed to go. And then once I got to high school, I became a wide receiver DB because we had somebody who could throw the ball and coaches wanted to take advantage of the speed. So they would just throw the ball out there and say, Chris, go get it. And I was pretty good at that. Basketball, I was a point guard because I'm not that tall. I'm 5'10", so I wasn't going to go into the low block. Basketball was not played the way it's played now. That's more positionless, and smaller guys have a chance to get on the court and bomb away from 3. That wasn't the game back in the 90s. You had to dig in and shoot mid-range and throw the ball into the low block, and you got a big man and you worked around them. So it was a very different game at the time. And then baseball, played center field, and that's probably why I didn't really love baseball, because I got bored out there. When you're playing youth baseball and you have a pitcher who's pretty good as a center fielder, you're pretty much doing nothing the entire game, and you get like 2 or 3 at bats. And as soon as guys started throwing curveballs at my head and I was not allowed to run the mound and hit back, I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna go play football. There's more excitement there.
So when did you give up baseball? How old were you?
7th grade.
Okay.
7th grade. It was twofold. It was one. The track coach really wanted me. The track coach was like, "Hey, we're starting a track team. We would love to have you. You'd be amazing. You would do this, and this." And then again, I started to see curveballs were coming at my face, and I'm like, I was not used to that. That wasn't something that I really enjoyed or liked at the time, right? So for me, it was like, okay, well, I'm going to put the glove down and pick up some track spikes. And remember, this is the time, 1996. This is the Olympics in Atlanta. This is Michael Johnson in his heyday, right? With the gold shoes, and he's running the 200 and the 400, and he's breaking world records. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I want to do. I'm gonna get some spikes. I'm gonna paint them gold. I'm gonna join the team, and that's gonna be my jam.
Well, 5'10", and every sport you played, you were playing positions that required speed for sure and quickness
Yeah.
as well. It's a pretty good height back for a 42-year-old guy back when you were a teenager. That's a good height. I mean, it's average height today, I think, roughly in
Yeah.
America. But you were not like a 5'7" guy that just happened to also be quick.
No, I wasn't I wasn't a short guy, but I wasn't a tall guy either. I was kind of like in between that, right?
Yeah. All right. So let's talk a little bit about track. So you mentioned Michael Johnson. I think he's the only super famous, and I'm going to call him a sprinter. I'm going to say 200, 400 is a sprint, even though it's different than the 100.
Yeah.
But he's the first non-100 guy, really, really fast, that got a ton of international attention.
Yeah, I think there was a couple of things with Michael Johnson. Like his running style was very unique. He had that very upright running style that was different than everybody else's. And then, of course, he had the flashiness, the gold shoes that, and he was breaking the world records, and he was willing to put himself out there. Which, nowadays that's just normal. You kind of have to be that type of person if you want to run track and field, or if you really want to compete at the highest level. You kind of got to build your own brand. At that point, you become a business, and it just becomes part of the marketing and the things that you have to do to make yourself money, especially in that sport that's not as popular as football or basketball. And they have to do different sponsorship type of deals to get themselves paid. So yeah, Michael Johnson was one of the first and still is very popular to this day. And then you have guys like Noah Lyles, who is now going to be probably the favorite going into the Olympics here in Paris. You've got a 400 hurdler on the women's side, Sydney McLaughlin, who resonates with a lot of people. Yeah. So and track and field is just one of those sports that I always love to watch, because there's no luck involved in that sport. If you win, you earned it. There wasn't like a fluke flag called on that penalty or a play that shouldn't have happened. Like if you win, you earned it.
Yeah, it's as objective as it gets in sports, right?
Yeah, and it's one of those things that I love, because like my daughter's getting into swimming right now. My youngest daughter is 7, and I love it because 10 seconds is 10 seconds everywhere you go. It doesn't matter who the pitcher is. It doesn't matter if the team has chemistry. It doesn't matter if you're getting playing time. Like, you get into your lane, you do your thing. Nobody can say anything about it, right? There's no politics, because the time is the time. So I love that about track and field, and I love that about swimming.
No, it's a fantastic point, because I've been amazed to see or hear about the number of really dads that are coaching at varsity high school level. That never happened back in the day. I mean, you had a mean independent guy who didn't care who your parents were. And
exactly.
I'm talking about football in particular. But now you have dads all over the place. I'm like, what is happening? And you're a trainer. That's what you do for a living. You own a gym. We're certainly going to talk about that. But part of what you're doing is teaching toughness, right? And that makes kids of today pretty unusual, because a lot of them are being raised pretty soft.
It's very weird. So sports to me was always a meritocracy, right? If you were the best, you played. It didn't matter who your dad was. It didn't matter, any of that stuff. It just mattered if you were the best, you played. If you performed well, you played. If the coaches trusted you, you played. It wasn't about any of the politics stuff. That unfortunately is not the case anymore with youth sports. And that's really sad, because the kids are losing out on that experience. The kids are losing out on the ability to create options and desperations, right? We have a population of kids that have all of the options in the world, but they don't know how to work with desperation, that toughness, that grit, that resilience that you're talking about. And then we have a population of kids that are in some pretty desperate situations, and they're not being given options, or they're not being taught that sports can give them options. They're being taught that sports is their only way out. And that's not true. You can use sports to go to an Ivy League university and create a great career for yourself outside of the NFL or the NBA. So it's really sad to see what's happening with youth sports.
Yeah, you mentioned options. That's certainly true. It also teaches a lot of life lessons that you can apply to almost any endeavor, right?
And that's the thing. I think that's the part that I find very frustrating for me, because I get it. Like, sports is a great tool, a great avenue, or a great vehicle for the life lessons, right? But those life lessons come with the standard of excellence that you demand. I train every sport. I have trained with volleyball players, lacrosse players. I have trained the best football and basketball players in this country. I've trained the best soccer players in the world. I've trained the best swimmer in the history of the world. And they all say the same thing. They all think that their sport is unique and like you only get these lessons from swimming. You only get these lessons from football. And like I understand what they're saying, but the truth is like the lessons come from a standard of excellence in that pursuit of excellence. And unfortunately, what we're doing with youth sports is we're not teaching excellence, we're teaching excuses, right? Oh, you didn't play because that coach doesn't know what he's doing. Oh, you're not starting because that coach, you know what I mean? Instead of saying, no, you got to get better, you got to overcome this adversity or whatever, right? Oh, you're getting cut because like my daughter got cut from a lot of different teams for a lot of different reasons that had nothing to do with her play. And I never once called the coach, called the AD, never had a meeting. I said, you're going to have to deal with this. Get better because I'm not playing politics. That's not what sports is about.
Make it impossible for the coach to cut you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And your standard of excellence point, I absolutely agree with that. There's also this notion of fair competition, which means you do everything you possibly can within the rules. And look, you and I both played high school football and you played in college. You might get away with some things every once in a while, and that's part of the game too.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly not advocating for egregious violations of rules in anything, sports or otherwise.
Yeah.
But it's kind of I mean, everything's cyclical, right? The world will get tougher again, and kids will go through experiences where they are striving to meet that standard of excellence, but it certainly doesn't seem to be happening as often and in as many places as it did 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. And I hope, like, look, again, I'm coming from the perspective of a couple of different, from a couple of different ways. I'm coming from the perspective of a former athlete who has done it. I'm coming from a perspective of a coach who has worked with athletes on all levels in all different sports. I'm coming from the perspective of a parent who has now guided his kids through youth sports. And my daughter's now going on to Penn State Brandywine to play softball. My son is now getting into high school football. And I'm also coming at you from the perspective of a business owner in the industry of youth sports. So I'm not going to say that I'm the best person to talk to about this, but I can give you the perspective of what I see from all those different angles.
Well, those angles, and you've immersed yourself in competition your entire life, regardless of whether it's a parent, a coach, a trainer, or a competitor. But you also, and I love how you coyly slipped in the best swimmer of all time. I'm guessing Michael Phelps. Is that what we're talking about?
No, Kaylee Ledecky.
Okay.
So I didn't have a chance to work with Phelps. I mean, Phelps was in the building for sure when we were doing our stuff over at the USOTC in Colorado Springs. But, you know, we had the opportunity. I was working with a company called Explosive Performance at the time up in Ashburn, Virginia. And one of the contracts that we had was with NCAP Swimming, which is where Kaylee Ledecky called home for a long time when she was still a student at Stone Ridge in Maryland. Okay. So I had the chance to work with her and just kind of see her mentality and see some of those other swimmers who were elite, see the type of effort and the type of attitude that they would have towards their workouts, their relentlessness, their resilience, their consistency, right? They don't miss workouts for anything. They're like, they plan their doctor's appointments around the workouts, not their workouts around the doctor's appointments, right? So it's a different level of commitment and consistency that, again, it's universal to anybody who wants to be excellent. It's not universal to swimming. It's not universal to football. It's universal to anybody who wants to be great at anything, really.
Chris, this is awesome for me because Kaylee Ledecky, I think, you tell me if I'm wrong here, and we could certainly Google this pretty quickly. Does she have the most gold medals of anybody to ever compete in the Olympics already?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, she's been competing since she was 15 or 16 years old. And the most fascinating part about that is not just the amount of gold medals that she's won. She's winning events that you're not supposed to win. She started out as a distance swimmer, and that's her event. If you look at the 1500, I think she has the top 25 times of all time. And like, when you watch the Olympics this summer in Paris, you're going to watch that event and it's going to look like she's swimming by herself in a pool because nobody else is even close.
Or when they are close, she's lapped them.
Right. But she's swimming in that event, but she's also swimming in the short distance events, right? That's like Usain Bolt winning the 100-meter dash and also winning the marathon.
Yeah.
That's what's freaking amazing about Katie Ledecky and what she's doing.
So Katie is going to Paris, as you just alluded to, where she's just going to pile up even more medals and potentially more records. And she's not old by athletic standards. She's not old. Maybe by swimming standards, she's a little old. I don't know, but she's definitely not old for athletes in general.
I mean, she's definitely not old, because if she's old, then I'm ancient, right? So like, she's definitely not old. So, but we're seeing this today with people like myself and others of and my other colleagues in the field. We are helping athletes prolong their prime much longer than they used to be, right? And a lot of that has changed. Like, people are taking sports more seriously. One, because they realize that there's nothing like an NBA paycheck or an NFL paycheck. So the longer I can make this last, the better I'm going to be set up for life. And the paychecks in the NBA are getting crazy right now, right? So guys are not necessarily going out and smoking cigarettes anymore. Like that has changed from the 80s, right?
Yeah,
So guys are taking care of their bodies. You see somebody like a LeBron James who's approaching 40 and has no signs of slowing down. I mean, he's going to be playing basketball with his son in the NBA this year. That's unheard of. And it's not like he's a guy at the 11th, 12th man off the bench. He's a starter. He's an all-pro. He's an all-NBA level player still, 20 years into the league. Yeah. So, and he's not the only one. Tom Brady went for however long. He was 42 or something like that when he retired. And you're seeing
he was 45.
45.
And I know that because I'm a Bucks fan.
There you go. Yeah. And you got Aaron Rodgers, who's in his 40s and he's still playing. So they're like the careers are being prolonged with the sports science and good trainers out there and good training habits and methods. And yeah, like even if somebody like Michael Phelps wanted to, he could probably come back. I don't know that he wants to, but
he could probably win some medals if he came back and trained seriously for it. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, right? You mentioned the 80s, guys were smoking, didn't take it that seriously. Well, they weren't making anywhere near as much money as these guys do today.
Right.
Pick a sport. NBA is an obvious example, but baseball and football are not much different. And so as the money increases, so does the understanding and so does the dedication. It's fascinating to watch what's happened over the last few decades. I can't leave Ledecky yet, though. So I happened to meet LaShawn Merritt, who's a guy who won the 400 in the 08 and 2012 Olympics.
Yeah, I remember the name.
He's from Virginia. He's got a 4x4 relay gold as well. And he got a silver and something else. And as I was talking to him, I said, look, did Usain Bolt ever come up to the 400? He goes, he tried a couple times, but he knew better than that. And so your Ledecky point around winning the sprints in swimming and then winning marathons.
Yeah.
People can't even dominate. And you understand track better than I do.
Yeah.
But have somebody dominate at the highest level in the 100, 200, 400. It's never happened.
Yeah.
It's never happened.
Not the 1, 2, and the 4. So you've had guys win the double and the 1 and the 2. You've had guys that can win the 2 and the 4. Part of it too is just the beating that your body takes. Like, for you to go through Sydney McLaughlin, going back to her, right? Like, if she wanted to, she could win the 400 open and the 400 hurdles, but her body would have to go through absolute hell to do that, right?
Because the motions are so different.
The motions are so different, and the beating that you're going to take. Like, you can do this in swimming because you're not taking a beating when you're swimming. When you're running and you're pounding that track, like the amount of force that an athlete is going to pound into that track and that they have to absorb over that 400-meter run, even over a 100-meter run, like that's a lot that your body has to absorb. Yes, it's only 9 and some change, or just under 10 seconds of a race. But I promise you, the amount of force that those guys are creating and absorbing is an insane amount of force, enough that would leave the average person sore for days after just one race.
Yeah, and to your point, it's 25 to 35 steps or poundings into the track that comes up to you pretty quickly, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's pretty impossible for somebody to do that. And I know that, like, the 400, if you ask track athletes, like the 400 is not something that they typically enjoy running. They do it like you have to be a little bit psycho to enjoy running the 400 and the 400 hurdles. Katie is a little bit psycho, right? Like this is what she loves to do. I think there was an interview somewhere. I found it like on YouTube or something, and they're interviewing the swimmers, and they all talk about how dreadful it is to wake up at 4 a.m. to jump into a cold pool. And Katie's like, I love it. There's nothing dreadful about that. That's what I want to do. You know what I mean? So like, this is who she was meant to be. She's living her purpose, and it's fun to watch.
And look, you don't have to answer this question, but my guess is she's a really down to earth, cool person too.
The coolest, chillest person that you will ever meet. And here's another thing about these uber competitive athletes that you say, right? Like I hear this so much in youth sports. Oh, my kid is competitive, and we use that as an excuse for bad behavior and this and that, right? And like there's a difference between competitive and comparative, right? If you're only just comparing yourself to everybody else and to your teammates and this and that, that's not competitive. Competitive is you against you. And Katie has always been that way. I distinctly remember this conversation with her back at the US OTC, and I asked her what the world record was because I didn't know. If I set the world record at 16 years old, I would have that thing tattooed all over my face. Everybody would know what the world record is, right? Like nobody in the history of the world has ever swam this event faster than me. Everybody's going to know about it. So maybe that was God's plan to not give me that type of talent, right? But Katie didn't even know what the world record was. She was like, yeah, I don't remember what the time was, and I don't care because I just want to beat it. Right?
Yeah, so
she knows that she knows that she can get better, and she wants to be the best version of herself. It was never about setting the record. It was about being the best version of herself. So like she was so cool about that. She never let that get to her head. It was never a thing for her. She just wanted to swim.
So it's not a high school or a college conference or a national or an international record in her mind. It was always beating her PR.
It's always about her just being the best that she could be. That was it.
Yeah. No, and look what happened.
And look what happened. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. It's wild.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. You and I, when we had a chat a couple weeks ago, had mentioned training Jason Tatum. And how did you describe him?
Same. The same. So Jason, when I met him, he was still 17 years old, coming out of high school. He was going to be going into Duke the next year. And he was somebody that was, a Kobe fan, a Kobe holic. Anything Kobe was all that he wanted to do. And this is how he was programming his life. He wanted to be in the NBA. He wanted to be an NBA champion, which he is now. So congrats to him. His older cousin is Bradley Beal. So, as Brad was making his way through the NBA and taking his bumps and bruises and learning about the basketball side, the business side, everything that goes with it. Jason was right there taking notes, learning from it. And, he was somebody that put the work in, never got distracted, never let anything take him off that course. And he was just hyper focused on his goal, and he did it. He's an all NBA type of player. He's probably going to win a gold medal this year with Team USA. He just won the NBA championship with the Celtics, and who knows what else is coming his way.
And he's young. He's still really young.
Very, yeah.
Yeah, he was 24, 25, something like that.
I think he's around 25, yeah. 25 now, yeah.
All right, let's go back to you in high school. You're playing football was your main thing, and academics was more important than football. For your parents, I imagine for you as well, if you ended up going to Cornell.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay, so I'll tell the story. It did become important to me. It wasn't always important to me. It was only important to me because that was the only way that my mom was going to allow me to wear a helmet, is if I had the GPA that she had set for me. She said, like the school's eligibility rules are this. My eligibility rules are this, right? And it was the quote unquote typical Asian parent, right? Like you can't come home with a B+. That's like coming home with an F, if you know what I mean. So it's like if I come home with a B+, she's like, "What the heck is going on? You didn't study. Like what's wrong with you? You're not focusing your classes." So, but then that became important to me as I got older, as started to see the vision. Like as a 155-pound Filipino kid coming out of high school, my chances of making the NFL were probably not very high. So I I understood that, and my mom and my dad helped me understand that, hey, like, you've got choices here. You've got a choice to go to Harvard, you got a choice to go to Cornell, or you got a choice to go to University of Maryland and hang out with your friends. So we're going to take that option away. You can go to Cornell, you can go to Harvard. Which one do you want to go to? So that was how my decision was made in high school.
Yeah, imagine what the world would be like if every parent was like that.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like, when I talk about the beauty of sports, the beauty of any sport is, again, it gives that kid who has nothing but options, right? Like, I am now in a neighborhood that I'm blessed to be in, and I'll never apologize for the privileges that my wife and I can now afford to give to our kids and the opportunities that we can give to them. I'll never apologize for that. But I always talk to my kids about entitlement, right? Like, entitlement is privilege without perspective. I'll say that again because I think that's a good way to phrase it, and we talk about it all the time. Entitlement is privilege without perspective. It's okay to have those privileges. Don't apologize for that. Somebody worked hard for that. But if you lose perspective of that, if you start to take that for granted and lose appreciation for that, if you start to think that everybody has access to that, that's when you start to lose perspective, and that's when you start to act entitled. And what we have in youth sports is a lot of entitled kids and entitled families that, because they have so many different options, because they can pick up their stuff and go start a new team or go start a new club or go find somewhere else to join. I don't like this travel team, I'm going to go to this travel team instead, right? Because we have that, we never teach kids how to be desperate, right? We never have that desperation, that grit, that toughness that they can build, that they need to be successful in life. And then the opposite side of that is the kids who are coming from situations that don't have a lot of options. They think this is the only way out, and they're losing perspective of the importance of creating options with their talent on the football field or the basketball court or whatever. So, part of my job is to help bring that, right? So, like, if I'm coaching a kid from this school, my attitude towards that kid and the lessons that I'm going to talk about with that kid and that family are going to be different than from another school, maybe from the east side or like Highland Springs or Verina, right? So, yeah, and for me as a coach, I have to be able to recognize those gaps and fill those gaps.
Yeah, I mean, so Chris, I love learning, and and I know you use the word perspective, but you're changing how I view the world a bit. We talk about generational impacts. Generational wealth has been thrown around a lot lately,
Sure.
but there's also generational mindsets that can touch grandparents, parents, and the kids. And you're right, entitlement over 3 generations, that's really hard to overcome. Coming from a place of socioeconomic challenges where you just believe you only have 1 or 2 paths, that's harder. I would argue that's a lot harder. But if you really step back, trying to break that, they're pretty darn hard. I don't want to equate them, but they're both pretty hard to break those cycles.
It's very hard because, when you're seen as the meal ticket, when you're seen as the way out, everybody in that family, everybody in that community also sees it, right? And then you start to get people that are hanging on, and it becomes it's not intentional, but it becomes so much of a burden to that kid. So much pressure is put on that kid unfairly to be the savior of the family, the savior of the city, the savior of whatever, right? And that's not fair, right? And then, like, what's happening now with the whole NIL deal. And I support NIL and support the right for these athletes to get paid. But athletes are now being exposed to the sharks a lot sooner than they were before. Because this is what's already happening with young athletes in the NFL and the NBA. It's just happening even younger now. You're getting athletes at 16, 17 years old signing NIL deals, getting endorsement deals, and they have no idea how money works. They have no idea how much to put aside for taxes. They have no idea, how to invest this money, or they don't even realize that, like, buying a Hellcat for cash is cheaper than buying a Hellcat and paying $1,500 a month for the next 72 months. Like, they don't even do that math. So, there's just a lot of education, and I like to think that I can be a part of that, where I can help bring this level of education and help these people, so that when this money does come, we know what to do with it, and it doesn't just get thrown right back into the cycle.
Yeah, no, it's scary, right? Because even when kids were going through 4 years of college and then going to the NFL, the NBA,
Yeah.
they didn't understand at that age.
They didn't understand it. They didn't understand it at that age. But what happened and why it was so much worse in the NBA, right? Because think about what was happening in the NBA. You had guys coming straight out of high school and into the league, whereas in the NFL, you went 3 years in college and then into the league. Now you're still a knucklehead, but the difference is during those 3 years in college, you made friends and you became buddies with people who eventually graduated. So now, as you start to get money, as you start to invest your money, as you start to look for people that you trust, the people who are in your circle of trust are people who are also educated versus the kids who were coming straight out of the NBA, straight into the NBA out of high school. They didn't have a circle of friends that went on to graduate from college. You see? So it was worse in the NBA than it was in the NFL.
No, that makes all the sense in the world. All right. Cornell or Harvard? You got into both, it sounds like?
Yeah.
Well, actually, before we go there, I have a buddy of mine. He's Korean. I mean, he's American, but he's Korean descent.
Sure.
And he used to tell me these amazing stories. His dad wasn't around, so mom was raising both him and his younger brother. And he said he knew if he got anything below an A, he would have. There was this period in his life where he got creative around what there would be whiteout and then making copies of things.
Oh man,
rewriting. Did you ever experience any of that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I got in trouble. I'm not perfect. I made a lot of mistakes. I definitely made a lot of mistakes as a kid, and there were definitely tests that I had to get signed. Like in the school that I was at, we had to get all tests signed. It didn't matter if you got an A or a B or an F. You still had to get it signed because they wanted the parents to be able to see it and be involved in all the other stuff. So there were times when I would just try to sign it from my dad to make it like it was signed. And I got caught, of course, because I'm an idiot. And the punishment was way worse. Like for me forging that signature, I got into a lot of heat for that and other things. But yeah, like coming home with a B or a B plus, like that was a tough conversation with my mom for sure. Right. And I remember watching my other friends at school make the honor roll. They got A's and B's and their parents are like taking them out to dinner and having, I'm like, what? How? I got like one B and I got screamed at. Right. So it was just, we still laugh. My siblings and I still laugh about that to this day. It's like, we had this conversation, like A is for average and B is for like below average. So,
well, I mean, as a parent now, do you accept B pluses?
It depends. It depends on the subject. It depends. So I know enough to know that like AP calculus and AP physics are very hard classes, right? Where my mom didn't understand that. My mom was like, no, A is the only acceptable grade that we take here. And going through what I went through and trying to relay the message to my kids, it's if you put in the effort, if you put in the time that it took to do your best, then I'm happy with whatever result that you got. But if you're not putting in the effort, right, then you better get an A plus. Because if you're gonna not do your homework, if you're gonna not study, if you're gonna tell me that you got this and you're not gonna put in the work, now this better be an A plus, right? But if you put in the time and effort, and I can see you studying and I can see you asking questions about this and that, then I don't care what the grade is.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's a good adaptation from how you were raised.
Yeah,
because your mom, was she first generation?
Yeah, so I was born in the Philippines.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So my mom is first generation immigrant. My dad's second generation. And I was born in the Philippines. My dad met my mom while he was in college back in the Philippines. I was born there. We moved here after my brother was born. So both him and I were born in the Philippines.
But you were what, 2 or 3 when you came here?
I was 4. I was 4 when he came here. Yeah. So and she was still very much from that mold. Like, A's are the only thing that are acceptable here. My dad was a little bit more lenient, right? Because he understood, but my mom was not.
No, wow, that's fascinating. Did you speak English in the house? Or...
We spoke both. So this is another thing. Like to this day, my mom will tell you this is probably one of the biggest mistakes that she made. When we first came over here, she made me stop speaking Tagalog because I would get into scuffles and fights at school because I would still speak both. In the Philippines, people speak both English and Tagalog. So I would say things in Tagalog. Nobody would understand me. I would get frustrated. I would get in fights. You got to stop speaking Tagalog. You're only allowed to speak English now in the house. So I lost the ability to speak Tagalog. I can still understand it when people are telling me things to a certain extent. Like if you just have a normal conversation with me, I can understand. If you start telling a story and the language starts to get a little bit more artistic, then I'll lose you. But I can't respond in anything other than English now.
Yeah, and that is a shame because you're losing part of your family history and your you descended from that language, right?
Yeah. And look, it was a different time. Like in the early 90s, it wasn't like it is today when people are encouraged and applauded for knowing different languages. It was assimilate or get the F out.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah.
You go back?
We do. So I haven't been back since before the pandemic. But yeah, we try to go back. We try to bring the kids there because again, it's a great thing for them to see where we've come from and see how other people live in this world. Versus, I live in a very nice neighborhood here in Chesterfield County, Virginia. And, I think that I want them to see that the world is not this bubble that you see every single day, so we try to go back.
Were you born in Manila?
I was born in Manila. Yeah.
Yeah. I had the fortune of going to Manila, I don't know, 15 years ago. And I've never, how do they transport folks on those smaller, I can't remember the name of them.
So there's tricycles and then there's jeepneys.
Jeepneys.
The jeepneys. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've never seen so many people in such a small thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah. That's normal.
Yeah.
So here it's like, it's funny. So here's another thing about my mom, right? Like when we be here, everybody wears a seatbelt, everybody in a car seat, all this, and this, right? Right. Make sure that you have a seatbelt on. When we go to the Philippines and we're there'd be like 10 people in a Honda Civic, no seatbelts, nobody cares. And my mom isn't saying a freaking word, right? Like that was so funny about going home.
You got to assimilate wherever you are, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Oh, man. All right. Cornell versus Harvard. Why'd you pick Cornell?
So funny story. So I actually picked Harvard. That's where I wanted to go. It was the stupidest reason ever because I took official visits to both schools, and at the official visit, like breakfast is one of my favorite meals. So at the official visit at Cornell, we had bagels and cream cheese, and at the official breakfast at Harvard, they had bacon and eggs. So I was like, I'm going to choose Harvard because they had bacon. Like that was the stupidest reason, right?
But I'm with you.
Yeah.
I prefer that breakfast for sure.
Yeah, I was like, man, this was a better experience just because of the bacon. So I called the coach at Cornell because my mom told me, hey, you got to be a man. You got to call this coach and tell him you're not coming there. And he just didn't accept that answer. I didn't give him the bacon story. He just didn't accept that I was going to go to Harvard. He's like, no, you're not. You're coming here. Your friends are here. You have teammates who from your school who are coming here. You have teammates from your school who came last year. Like, you're coming here. I'm not going to accept this answer. Right. And sure enough, like he pulled on my arm a little bit. I don't know what he did to pull some strings, but then Harvard calls back a little bit later after I had already committed them, say, hey, yeah, your commitment is still good. We want you to come, but here they changed a couple things about the way that they wanted me to come in. And I was like, okay, well, if that's changed, then I'm actually going to go to Cornell instead. So I ended up there with some of my friends, and the coach who was recruiting me, his name is Ron Prince. One of the greatest coaches that I've ever had, and one of the guys that was extremely tough on you, extremely demanding on you. And as a 17, 18-year-old kid, I hated it, but now I appreciate it because it helped mold me into who I needed to be. Right. So I still appreciate him to this day for making me come to Cornell and then being so hard on me.
Yeah. So I'm very curious how that ended up happening, how Harvard ended up changing. It could have been an internal thing for them, right? They had other kids they were looking at, or it could have been there's some stuff going on across the league.
Who knows? Yeah, I'll never know the real answer. I think they wanted to line me up with Fitzpatrick because like I was the wide receiver coming in. Fitzpatrick was the quarterback coming in. They wanted to line me up so that we were in the same year, and that didn't happen. And who knows? I don't know. I didn't know that Ryan Fitzpatrick was going to be Ryan Fitzpatrick at the time, right? We were just like, they were just like, oh, we got this quarterback coming in, right? So I don't know. I just want to go to school. And this was like, I graduated high school at 17 years old. I played my first college football game at 17 years old. It's not like today where people reclass 2 or 3 times and they're starting college as a 20-year-old, right? So I was just like a 17-year-old kid ready to leave home and start college.
And you're playing against 22, 23-year-old kids.
Yeah, I was playing with grown men with a beard like yours, right? So that's when I was like, ooh, this game is a little bit different than the one I played at home.
All right, look, I'm asking this question purely out of curiosity. I went to high school with guys that played football in the Ivy League. Some played on what I would call the varsity team, the regular team, and then there's the 150 team.
Right, the sprint team. Yeah.
Did you play on the varsity team?
I played on the varsity team. Every year, every day, the 150 coach would try to recruit me, and I was like,
"Why would I have lost weight and played for him?" Right?
I didn't even have to lose weight. I could have. Right.
5'10", you were under 150?
Yeah, I was like 155 soaking wet. But It's a 150 league, but they had guys on the team that were like 180, 185. I forget what the rules exactly were. I never really paid attention. I never gave it serious consideration. But yeah, I was like, why would I want to come down there and play middle linebacker? Like I'm going to be a receiver here. This is what I'm going to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and if you could play for the team where you're going to be challenged more too, probably.
Yeah. We get to travel. We get to go play at Harvard. We get to go play at Yale and beat up on all these other Ivy League teams. So it was fun. And I had a lot of friends. I wasn't alone on that team. Some of my best friends to this day. I'm having a going away graduation party for my daughter this Saturday as we speak. We're recording this on a Wednesday night. Yep. This Saturday is going to be her graduation going away party. She's going to be at Penn State Brandywine. And all of my best friends from Cornell are coming.
Wow.
So and those were the guys that were my roommates or my teammates. And I'm so thankful for my experience there. So there was no way I was going to leave that football team to go play on the sprint team.
Yeah.
Those are my guys.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. And that's really cool. You guys are still connected, and sports does that, right? I mean,
absolutely.
That's a big part of it. Were y'all pretty good win-loss record when you were there?
We were pretty good our first 2 years. We challenged for the Ivy League title. We ended up not winning it. And then my coach took a job in the NFL, as coaches do when they get successful. They took a job elsewhere. So a whole new coaching staff came in, and we regressed as a team. We weren't fully bought in, and the players that we had on the roster didn't fit the system that the new coach wanted to run. So all water under the bridge now. But we had some pretty good athletes on our team. Kevin Booth, who went on to go win a Super Bowl with the New York Giants. Ricky Ronnie, who became the offensive coordinator at Penn State and is now the head coach at ODU. Bill Lazor was a coach there. Coach Raheem Morris was a D-backs coach when I was there. Raheem Morris is now the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons.
So, he was the head coach of my Bucks a while ago. Yeah.
He was the head coach of your Bucks for a little while. Yeah, that's right. So
yeah, that's wild. So you mentioned NIL, and at a high level, I agree that NIL is a good thing, but it certainly introduces a lot of challenges that we've already talked about, and we don't have to go back to that. Yeah. But the other big thing that's different now than it was, I think, when you were playing is the transfer portal. You can play for 4 different colleges in 4 years.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
It's something that we're going through the bad to get to the good, right? This is something that probably should have happened a long time ago, and it's something that needed to happen. And what we're going through right now needs to happen because it's not right that a kid who needs to move schools for whatever reason they want, whether it's a good reason or a bad reason, it's their choice. They shouldn't be locked into a school for the 4 years just because this is where they originally committed as an 18, 19-year-old. Right? Why would we hold them to that commitment when a coach can leave in the middle of the season? Right? So if we're going to get upset at if we're going to get upset at players leaving to try to find a situation that's better for themselves for whatever reason it may be, are we doing the same things to coaches who leave their teams in the middle of a season to go to like the JMU coach who left and didn't even coach the bowl game? Right? Nobody gave him heat. Nobody says, oh, that shouldn't be allowed, right?
Well, it's boosters and other people I call near boosters that want their cake and eat it too.
Yeah, and I get it. There's some change that's happening, and change is tough for people. It's not the traditional college football model that a lot of people grew up with. And I get that. But just because it's different doesn't mean it's not right. And at the end of the day, a college kid, a college athlete doesn't owe you anything because you're a fan of the team. You know what I mean? Like that person is still a person who has the right to make decisions of their life that are for their good. Like it's their choice. So they don't owe it to fans or boosters to stay at a school, right? So and then again, there'll be more to that. I'm not saying that there should be no loyalty. Absolutely not. There's definitely you want kids to learn how to stay at a school and tough it out and make the grass greener where they are. But I'm never going to blame a kid for trying to look for a better situation for himself.
Yeah, I mean, every kid that really loves the sport and loves competing, they want to be on the field, right? And if you're the backup, whatever the position is, and you suspect that you're going to be the backup next year, I'd believe too.
Yeah, and look, sometimes it's not even the backup. Sometimes it's the starter, right? It's a starter who's a 2-year, 3-year starter who isn't getting paid, maybe getting paid $30,000 a year from NIL money or however that's going to come now, because now it's going to come directly from the schools. And now that kid is getting paid 20-30, but you just offered some incoming freshman or some incoming transfer $200,000, and now that kid is saying, "Hey, I played for you for 3 years. I've been starting for 3 years. Can I get some of that?" Right?
Yeah.
And if not, this team wants to give it to me. So why would we stop that? You know what I mean? So it's a weird thing. I get why people are frustrated. I really do. But I also know that we got to get through the ugly to get to the good.
Well, and look, here's the other thing too. It is a change, and to your point, people typically don't like change. And if you're a fan of your alma mater, right, you want to see Cornell win in sports. I want to see my alma mater win in sports. And when that third best kid on the basketball team goes somewhere, it hurts.
Yep.
But my point to everybody that complains about transfer portal: have the best program in the land, and people are the best players are going to stick around. Look in the mirror, be better. It goes back to Katie Ledecky.
Yeah,
make yourself better.
I mean, UConn seems like they're doing fine.
Yeah,
right. UConn's doing just fine. Georgia, they're doing just fine. Right. Like people transfer in, people transfer out, and if you want to leave, okay, there's the door. We're not going to force you to stay here, but like we have a great culture here, and if you want to be a part of it, great. But if there's a situation, like it might be a situation where you don't even want to leave, but you have to, right? Like, hey, coach, I don't want to leave, but like this school has offered me $250,000 a year to come and play for them, and I'm not going to make that here. I have to take that money for my family.
Yeah, it's hard to turn that down. For a lot of this, it's impossible.
None of us would do that, Paul. We wouldn't do that as adults. We wouldn't turn an opportunity to make 10 times more money for the same work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's the part where I get it. It's tricky. I get it that like people have to make this adjustment. But the one thing I'll always do is stand up for the kids, because a lot of times I know these kids. I know the situations that they're in. I know how hard these decisions are, and it is an unfair burden that they're being put on with having to support their family, and then they're being criticized unfairly for making decisions that almost anybody would make.
I'm with you. Did you hear that thunder from my side?
I didn't know if it was coming from you or from me, because I think there's a storm on my side too.
Yeah, I think it's probably a line that's running through both of our neighborhoods right now. But that was pretty serious thunder. I haven't heard thunder like that in a while.
Yeah.
So when you were at Cornell, you majored in what?
Engineering.
That's right. You said that. Engineering. Yeah. And now you're not using your major. Is your mom upset with you?
No, she's not. No, she's not. She's very proud. I mean, I think everything changed once I became a parent and she became a grandparent. Like my mom just completely flipped switches. Like she went from this person to this person being Lola or grandma versus being mama. So like, oh, you want ice cream for breakfast? Cool. Yeah, you can have ice cream for breakfast. I was like, Mom, what the? There's no way you would let me have this. There's no way you would let me stay up late. Like, what are you doing?
So she makes you being a parent a little challenging, sounds like.
No, she does so much to help us as parents. But yes, there are times when my kids spend time with Lola that they get a little bit spoiled with certain things. Yeah.
So was the idea when you graduated that you were going to stay in the world of competitive athletics, or were you going to seriously look for an engineering job?
I knew about like 2 years into it that I was not going to be an engineer. I just like it wasn't my vibe. It wasn't my thing. It wasn't what I was passionate about. Like this is what I'm passionate about is people and serving people. And I think my mom gets that. My parents get that. They've actually always taught me to be a good person more than anything else, right? Like more than your job as the next great doctor or lawyer or surgeon or whatever, your most important job is going to be being a parent to our grandkids, right? So like
Yeah.
as a parent, I do that too, right? Like I want my children to be good parents eventually one day, right? Because they're going to be parents to my grandkids, and I'm going to do the same thing that my mom did. I'm going to flip the switch and go from this dad to the grandfather that's going to let their grandkids do whatever and spoil the heck out of them. So now that I'm a parent, and now that she knows what my role in this world is and how I have to serve my kids, like it's a little bit different, and she supports the things that the things that I do, the things that my wife and I want to do, whether it's coming down to watch the kids and to take them for a weekend so that we can get some time to recharge, whether it's helping out with lessons or training or whatever, she's always there. So it's been a cool transition, and it's the most important job that I have. It's also the most fulfilling job that I have.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same way as a parent and as a father. So the idea that you've been around all of these incredible athletes and you own a gym now, when somebody asks you, what do you do for a living? What do you tell them?
I'm a coach. That's it. Right. I think that there's a really good book out there by Martin Rooney. I forget the title of it. It's about coaching, coach to coach, I think is what it's called. Right. And if you think about the word coach, when I first started industry, I'll back up a little bit. When I first started industry, I didn't know what to call myself. Am I a speed and agility guy? Am I a strength coach? Am I like a personal trainer? What am I? Right. So we would talk about different things. Am I a performance coach? Am I a movement analyst, movement specialist, whatever? Right. Movement magician. Some of my athletes call me movement Miyagi, because like I'll figure out like how to do it. So, so part of what I do is to coach people. When you're coaching somebody, it's simply taking them from one place to another. That's all coaching is. So you can ride coach. If you're in England and you ride the bus, you're riding coach. You can fly coach. You can take coach as an Uber. That's a coach. It's coaching you from one spot to another. So my job is to coach somebody from one place to another. You're at this spot. You want to go to this spot. What's the best way to get you there? Where are you, right? Where are you in your movement? Where are you in your athletic development that is a potential injury risk? What are you doing that maybe isn't right? What do we need to fix first? What do we need to calibrate first before we start getting you stronger and faster and more resilient? So all of those things come into play. And sometimes it's I got to make somebody stronger. Sometimes I got to make somebody faster. Sometimes I got to make somebody a little bit more mobile. Sometimes I have to fix an injury. Sometimes I have to work on the mental side of things. Right? How do you deal with anxiety? How do you deal with stress? How do you deal with planning your calendar? How do you deal with eliminating distractions and going to sleep at night? Those are all things that are going to make you a high performer. So when people ask me what I do, it's different for everybody. I don't have a system. When you come to Onyx or when you come training with me, and this is another thing for me, going back to my family history, like if you're going to pay me $150 for a session, I better be freaking worth it. Because I think of how much my parents struggled to afford for me to play sports. And if somebody charged them $150, you for sure know my mom was going to have that conversation with me. Like, listen, we are paying a lot of money for this session. You better get a lot out of this and make sure that you are taking notes and this and that. So I try to be worth it. And being worth it for me means I have to personalize things for you so that it's exactly what you need. I can't just have you do things the Gorres way or the Onyx way. I do things that are going to be designed just for you to get you to where you want to go. Right. So when people come to me, it's often a blank piece of paper that we start with.
Yeah, you're specializing and tailoring based on who that kid is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're running your own business now, and so how much of your day or week is actually the core doing the coaching, doing the work versus how much of it is actually running a business?
I'd like to be able to run the business more, and that's we're starting to come to that point. As our team is growing and we're developing the trainers in our staff, and they're starting to take on more, and I'm able to hand them more. I can step back and get myself off of the floor and start to focus on the business. Like, hey, like, what does our lease agreement look like? How do we grow? How do we scale? How do we systemize all these things? So those are all. It's all the same principle of training, right? Identifying the leaks, fixing and making things more resilient. And now you're just doing it with a business instead of like a person, right? So, as we have a big, month this month because one of our trainers, one of our head coaches actually has been away with his family for the summer, traveling in Portugal. So for him to come back and be back in the building and taking care of stuff, that will allow me to, again, step off the floor a little bit and handle things. But I always leave time for people like Marley, for people who are coming in off a referral and they're like, hey, Chris Gaskell told me about you. We got to come in. So I at least want to be able to greet them and start that initial conversation, do the initial assessments, and then either hand them off or keep them to myself if that's something that they really need or really want.
You obviously are spending a lot of time doing very specific things to help them improve as athletes. Do you have time to watch them play the sports that they play?
We try. That's one of the things that we take really a lot of pride in is, we want, if we're going to be involved, we're going to be all in. So that means, one, we want to be there to support you for sure. Two, we want to be there to evaluate you because at the end of the day, it does you no good to get better in the weight room if it doesn't translate to the field.
Right.
Like my job is not to get you better at squats. That's not why you came in here. Right. If squats is going to help you get better on the field, then sure, we'll do it. We'll find a variation of a squat that's going to be beneficial to you, that's going to reduce the injury risks, that's going to make you stronger, faster, all those things. How would I know what to do if I'm not watching you, if I'm not watching you play, if I'm not watching you on film, right? So watching is a big thing for us.
All right, so you've watched Marley pitch?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so could you hit her changeup?
Probably not. I'm not going to tell her that. I'm going to tell her I'm going to smack it over the fence.
She's going to hear this. She's going to listen to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, all good.
Yeah.
All right, you've got a podcast. Tell me about your podcast.
So the podcast is called Train with the Best. I've been doing that podcast for a few years now with a buddy of mine. His name is Craig Hoffman, who is also a reporter for ESPN 980. He covers the Washington Commanders. He's covered also like the Washington Spirit as well as other teams in and around the DC area. Him and I actually started that podcast with Lorenzo Alexander when Lorenzo was still playing. He was still playing for Washington at that time, and then he had stints with the Cardinals, the Raiders, and the Bills. So he's no longer a main character on the show. He'll still pop in as a guest on some episodes. But really, the podcast was born out of conversations like you and I are having right now that would happen in the gym. Because, like, again, in the gym, we are the barbershop, we are the hair salon, right? Yeah. Like, our athletes are with us 3, 4, 5 times a week, sometimes more than that. And the conversations that we have just flow. And one day we decided to put a mic in front of our faces and record it and see if anybody would want to listen. And it turns out that it did. So it's usually about training, but, we'll connect it to other stuff. But, we'll have some athletes on there. We'll have coaches on there. We'll have people in the fitness industry, people who are inventors of equipment like Dr. Jason Worsland, who invented the Theragun, the percussive device that now everybody has copied. Yeah. We'll have people like that on the show to talk about the latest and greatest in sports science. So what's helping people perform better, recover better, sleep better, all those things.
When you were 16, 17, did you ever imagine this was going to be your life?
Heck no. I thought I was going to the NFL. Right? I thought I was going to be the next Gary Clark. Yeah. That was my guy growing up watching the Washington Redskins. Like, Gary Clark was the dude. So that's who I thought I was going to be. And then I thought I was going to be Michael Johnson. That didn't happen. So, but yeah, I definitely never imagined forging a career out of sports the way that I did, especially when you're in engineering school at Cornell, and I still joke with my friends that, like, I'm able to wear like sweatpants and joggers to work every day,
Yeah.
So I definitely never imagined that, but this world is crazy. You put in the work, you put in the effort, and you do it for the right things, right? Like I always tell people that I love this job, not because it's a career for me, but it's a purpose for me. I love being able to serve clients, athletes, and families, and help them get to where they want to go, right? So yeah, it's a calling, not just a career.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. I'm very happy I met you, Chris. Chris Gaskell, by the way, he's in my top 5 for helping me get guests, and he certainly scored a big one tonight, because I had no idea what your resume was. And by the way, that's what I do. I don't really try to learn a ton about people.
Yeah.
I want to learn it through the conversation.
Sure. Yeah.
I didn't know you were a Cornell guy. I didn't know you knew Katie Ledecky or Coach Katie Ledecky. And I imagine there are a bunch of other names that we haven't talked about tonight.
Yeah, there's probably a lot.
Yeah, I'm not going to ask you to go through any more of that tonight. But let's close with tell me about your family, like wife and kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the resume that I'm most proud of, right? Like, the career stuff is really cool. I've been blessed with a lot of opportunities to serve a lot of cool people, but the thing that I come home to is my wife and my kids every day. My wife Vina is also going to be 42 this year. And it's funny that she is a stay-at-home mom, and for a while she didn't really embrace that, because there was that negative connotation with that. When you hear stay-at-home mom, you think of whatever it is that you think of, whatever that term comes with, right? And she would talk about, I don't think I have anything to show for it. I'm 40 years old. What do I have to show? And it's like, we were starting to realize that as we get a little bit older, it's not the cars and the houses that make you a home or make you successful, but the joy that we have in our lives to be able to serve our kids, to be able to have outstanding relationships with our kids where they listen to us. That's like, I didn't think about it until I started to get more and more parents like, hey, can you talk to so-and-so? They won't listen to me, but they'll listen to you. And I'm like, what? What?
Did you just outsource your job as a parent?
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, sure, I'll talk to them. But the more and more I'm around our children, and the more I start to see, the way, obviously we have the same discussions every family has about, like, getting them do their chores and stuff like that. But for the most part, like there's a level of respect that the kids have for us, and the love that they have for one another. Like, I watch our kids talk to one another, make plans with one another, apologize to one another without us having to do that. Like, that's something that I'm probably most proud of, is, I see the way that my kids interact with each other, and the way that they love each other, and the way they know how to love, and how to, articulate their thoughts, how to be aware of their emotions, how to be aware of each other's emotions, and not just ignore each other. Like, that's pretty cool to see. And that's not just me who taught them that. That's definitely Vina. So when she says she doesn't have anything to show for it, I kind of argue with her, because like this is what you have to show. This is something that's pretty cool, that is not what everybody has,
No, it's unusual, man. What you just described is very unusual. I think most families have moments like that, but they struggle to have consistency in those relationships. And so it's awesome. Vina's done a heck of a job, and I know you're a big part of that too.
Yeah, and it's all coming to a bit of a culmination, a transition moment for us this Saturday or this fall, when Mila, our oldest, is going to go. She's going to play softball at Penn State Brandywine, which is just outside of Philly. So she'll start her freshman year. My oldest son, Marcelo, he'll start his freshman year at Cosby High School here in Chesterfield, Virginia. And then I have another son, DJ, who is going to be in 5th grade. And DJ, I'm giving him an extra shout out here, because he's often the one that in podcasts doesn't get talked about, because he's I guess the middle child, right? Like, Marcelo's the oldest. He's the football player. Marcelo's the oldest son. Mila's the oldest of the family, and she's the softball player. And then my youngest, who's a swimmer, Bree is 7 years old. So DJ often gets overlooked. So I'm giving him an extra shout out now. He's going into 5th grade. He's a hooper. He keeps up. He's somebody that doesn't know it yet, but has already adopted a lot of the work ethic and the attitude from his older siblings that has put him far beyond his peers, right? Like he gets up in the morning to go run by himself. He'll get up in the morning to do planks and push-ups and abs by himself, and like
Wow.
he'll remind people to do it, right? Like he eats healthy. He'll say, no, I got to have a salad today because we had pizza yesterday. Like those are decisions that he makes without being prompted. And so for him to have that type of attitude as a 10-year-old,
That's crazy.
that's
I don't know any other 10-year-old that's like that.
yeah, neither do I. So for him to adopt those things, and he'll say things like, I didn't have the emotional intelligence that I needed to have today. I'm like, what? Who?
I didn't know what that was until I was in
what?
my 30s.
Yeah. Right. Like when we have our family prayers, he'll pray for that. He'll pray for forgiveness. Like he'll say, oh, I need to be forgiven. I didn't have the emotional intelligence that I should have had with my younger sister. And I'm like, what? Right. So he amazes me every day. So special shout out to DJ. And then Bree is our youngest. She's a swimmer. This is her first year swimming. And she has really enjoyed it. And we've enjoyed it too, because it's been giving her something hard to do. Right. It's funny. We joke about it because before we moved down here, we were in a very different situation. Again, not a bad situation, but it's certainly not the best. And Mila grew up in a neighborhood where she saw a lot more diversity and a lot more challenge. Bree grew up in this house, so she hasn't had the same set of challenges. So for her to dig into swimming and to have that number, her time that she has to beat, and she has to compete against herself. I mean, it's just like, it's been an amazing summer for her to really like challenge herself and grow as a person. And it's fun to watch.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can tell you're a very proud father of all four.
Yeah. Thank you. Again, that's the role that I cherish the most.
Yeah, as you should, and I'm glad you are so balanced and enthusiastic about your children, as you should be.
I would talk about my kids all day, and again, this is why me and Chris Gaskell get along so much. And like, I will shoot him a text randomly every now and again, just to tell him how much I appreciate him and how much, as a father, I can see his example and the things that he's doing. And I know what it's like as a dad to sometimes feel like you're not being appreciated, or, just like, yeah, I'll take care of it. And nobody really knows how much stress you're dealing with and all that. So I usually, with him and with JC Harmon and with Jameson Britt and with Keetwan Heath and some of the other guys that I'm forgetting to name right now, I'll shoot them random texts to be like, hey man, I appreciate you as a guy. Love you. Everything that you're doing, your family, keep doing it. And, I'll always have that bond with Mr. Gaskell.
Yeah, I mean, what you're doing with those texts, people typically don't do, but fathers put a lot. Look, and this is not a pity party. You and I are not victims, but I joke. But there's some truth to this. That we have 3 children and 2 dogs, so there are 7 living beings in the house, and I'm number 7. I come in 6th place.
Yeah. Your heartbeat. If we looked at the monitors, right? If we're looking at monitors, your heartbeat is number 7. There are 6 heartbeats in front of you that you always put in front of yours, right? That's right. That's what you're responsible for. And it's a role that you don't shy away from. It's a role that you embrace, right? You don't have days off, right? So, and you can't complain, but every once and again, it's nice to hear other fathers recognize that and say, hey man, you're doing a good job.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love it. Well, hey, Chris, I'm so happy we met, man. I really appreciate you doing this tonight. I know you didn't have to, but I really enjoyed the conversation. I learned a lot as we went through. So thanks, man.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris Gaskell, for putting this together. And thank you, Paul, for inviting me to the center of the universe.
Nice.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd also really appreciate if you'd rate and review us. You can find us at scodupodcast.com.